The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government in what we were tasked to do.
In the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, we have a right to life, we have a right to defend life.
This legislation is centered on meeting the needs of Idaho families.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
The courts have long held that our ability to transfer title on real property benefits society as a whole.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
I feel like we're back to an unappointed board that gets to decide who is essential and who is non-essential.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
And for me, it's about a couple things. It's about food security, it's about national security, and it's about preserving American exceptionalism.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
Good morning, Matt Edwards here, and we are live on the air. It's Idaho Signal, March 11, 2024. I am currently traveling, so today, this morning, we're going to have for you a special presentation. We're going to show the entire hearing that happened last week for House Bill 668 that occurred in the House Judiciary and Rules Committee. This bill, House Bill 668, would bar public funding, taxpayer dollars, going to sex change operations, puberty blockers, hormone therapy, gender affirming care, whatever Orwellian term you want to use. This bill would prevent the public funding of those things. And so we think it's important, as we've done before with other bills, to watch the entire hearing, to listen to the debate back and forth, and to see the process, to see how it happens. We will be back tomorrow live with a live show, hopefully. And but in the meantime, please watch this important bill hearing, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Representative Julianne Young. I represent District 30, and I bring to the committee today House Bill 668. This bill is familiar to this committee. Earlier we heard House Bill 520. During the hearing on House Bill 520, there was a question raised that we believed was adequately addressed in the draft. However, as we looked at it, we decided that some further clarification would be a good idea. And so we have reprinted that bill in the form of House Bill 668. House Bill 668 begins with a legislative intent section, which reads as follows. The legislature finds that the surgical operations and medical procedures described in Section 18-1506C3 Idaho Code, when used for the purposes of altering the appearance of an individual in order to affirm the individual's perception of the individual's sex in a way that is inconsistent with the individual's biological sex, carry substantial risks, and have known harmful effects, including irreversible physical alterations, and in some cases, sterility and lifelong sexual dysfunction. So, Mr. Chairman, with your consent, since I am not a medical doctor, I thought it would be good to have an expert witness that could provide some perspective on this piece of House Bill 668. And so, with your permission, I would like to yield a portion of my opening to Dr. Teague.
All right, I'll see if I can get him brought up on the screen. Dr. Teague, can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Welcome to committee here in Idaho. If you would, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, if you represent anyone, and then tell us what you know on the subject of this bill.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm in South Carolina. Dr. Lynn Teague, I'm a board-certified pediatric urologist. I've been in practice since 1986, and my most recent position is as a professor and chief of the Pediatric Urology Service at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine. In pediatric urology, we focus heavily on the repair of congenital problems. One of the most challenging problems we face is when a child is born with genitals that are incompletely formed. As a profession, we've made tremendous advances in the treatment of these children since I began my career. These advances came about through the dedicated work of clinicians and researchers around the world who developed the scientific evidence necessary to repair these complex conditions. It's this evidence-based approach to medicine that allows me to confidently counsel the parents of my patients. I'm speaking today in support of the bill because I see that hard-won evidence-based approach to complex conditions being brushed aside. In no other realm is the patient, usually a child at that, the one who makes the diagnosis and who must then be supported in that diagnosis without question. Parents are being misled and told that the only way to help their troubled child is to support gender transition. You must do this, they are told, before the psychological issues, such as anxiety and depression, can resolve. Start the puberty blockers now, even though there's good evidence that the long-term effects are harmful and not always reversible. After that, you can begin the cross-sex hormones, and thereby you will ensure future infertility. You can then complete transition surgically, often with procedures that we have developed for our other patients. Given this misrepresentation and the mantra, better a live daughter than a dead son, what parent can really make an informed decision? What is the evidence that allows clinicians to make such recommendations? To be honest, it is amazingly weak. A prime example is an off-cited study from Cornell University a few years ago, which purportedly systematically reviewed 25 years of transgender research and deemed 56 articles out of over 4,000 suitable for inclusion in the study. They found 93% of the articles demonstrated improved well-being after transitioning. While this could be considered a settled science scenario, the truth is actually much different. The study did not meet the recognized standards for a systematic literature review, and the articles chosen were not high-quality studies demonstrating measurable results. This renders the study conclusion meaningless at best and downright misleading at worst. Regardless, the results were trumpeted in the New York Times and other popular publications at the time. This is only one example of many of research that's being driven by ideology rather than scientific inquiry. Genuine systematic reviews conducted by public health authorities in Finland, Sweden, and England concluded that the risk-benefit ratio of adolescent gender transition ranges from, at best, unknown all the way to unfavorable. As a result, in Europe, there's been a shift from the gender-affirming care model of medical intervention to a more conservative approach that addresses the psychiatric comorbidities first. Gender clinics in Europe are now being reined in and closed because of the harm they have caused. These children are trying now to recover from the harm caused by the decades of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and gender-affirming surgery. This harm extends into adulthood. Nearly all transgender studies are hampered by short follow-up period. As an example, the recent article in the Journal of the American Medical Association's Open Network demonstrated the benefit, supposedly, of gender-affirming approach, but it only had a follow-up period of 12 months. In contrast, a Swedish study with over 10-year follow-up showed that adults who received sex reassignment surgery were 19 times more likely to attempt suicide than the general population. Clearly, gender-affirming care was not helpful for this group of patients. You now have a chance to prevent such harm from ever taking place in Idaho. I ask for your support for the House Bill 668, and I thank you very much for giving me this time to speak to you.
To children. And so rather than reference that other statute, which was specific to minors, we simply pulled that language over into this new statute and made it clear that the exemptions apply to both children and minors. And so there are no questions there. The balance of the bill is identical to House Bill 520. And so I won't spend a lot of time on it, except to say that really the subject of this bill is whether the state of Idaho believes that these surgical procedures and operations are an appropriate use of taxpayer funds. As a body, we are responsible to oversee the use of those funds. As you can see from the testimony given by Dr. Teague, the results of these procedures are controversial at best at this point in time. You can imitate the appearance of the other sex. You can interrupt healthy sexual development. You can administer cross-sex hormones to create secondary sex characteristics of the opposite sex in an individual, but you can never create the healthy function of the opposite sex in an individual who is not that sex. And these treatments and procedures come with a very high cost in terms of long-term effects to an individual's health and well-being. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I also would like to draw your attention to a letter in your folder from the governor's office, which was evidence submitted as part of another case, indicating some of his concerns and position on this issue. And I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions from Committee of Representative Young? All right, thank you, Representative Young.
I have a question.
You may take your seat as there's a lot of testimony. Oh, Representative Gannon, how did I know that I was still going to come on?
Yes, well, you know, I was just wondering, Mr. Chairman and Representative Young, I was wondering if you're going to have any Idaho physicians testify in support of this bill.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon, I wondered if somebody would take a shot at that. I think there may be some. I have no idea who is signed up, but one thing I know for sure, and that is that Dr. Teague's credentials are impeccable, and his experience certainly allows him to speak to this issue. And so I guess we'll see what happens next. Thank you.
Representative Allgood.
Yes, I was just trying to bring up the previous bill because I don't remember. Did the previous bill include medications? This one is clearly surgical. Did the previous bill include medication?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Allgood, that language is all identical to House Bill 520, yes.
Okay. Follow-up question?
Go ahead.
And I think this was discussed briefly last time we heard this, but I just want to make sure I understand. People that are on state insurance, how does this affect them? I mean, will this control how state insurance reimburses or funds particular things?
Go ahead, Representative Young.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Allgood, this bill does not speak specifically to the issue of state insurance. It speaks to the use of public funds. And so there are some things there that would remain unanswered questions.
I see your light is still on, Representative Allgood. Do you have another question? There we go. Okay. Representative Young, it's going to be quite a while. I have several witnesses, so if you want to take your seat up here, that would be fine while we go through the questions or the testifiers. All right. First up is going to be John Collins, followed by Isaac Creighton. Mr. Collins, welcome to committee. If you would introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and if you represent any organization.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee members, my name is John Collins, and I'm here representing myself, 9 grandchildren that are here in Idaho, and my church, Restored Community Church, and several other pastors that represent several thousand common sense voters. I am in favor of passing legislation preventing tax dollars from being used for gender transitioning. First, I've heard it argued that since people opposing this law are taxpayers. They should have an inherent right to receive government help. I submit that we're all taxpayers, and the issue is not who pays taxes, but how this legislative body spends them. The overriding concern should be as to how to impact the common good of all of its citizenry, not just a vocal minority. Secondly, government funding for gender transitioning adds grease to an already slippery slope. Dysphoria issues are not just gender related. There are many body dysphoria disorders in society, from being overweight to physical abnormalities, birth defects, and even hair loss. Studies show that these dysphoric issues, such as anorexia, can also lead to suicide. In some cases, up to 2.4% of those who have such a disorder. So where do we draw the line? Should government offer up funds for body dysphoric issues, liposuction, cosmetic surgeries, or treatment for anorexia? Third, government funding for transitioning from one sex to another, as we've just heard, is a relatively new experience, social experience, the long-lasting results of which cannot be fully measured. On top of that, it only adds to the topic of gender confusion. What does it say to my little grandchildren about
Mr. Collins, you'll have to wrap up a little bit. We have a time limit.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You can give me a couple sentences and finish up.
All right. This just adds simply to gender confusion. What does it say if the government says that we can change your sex? If a school teacher proposes that, my little grandchildren had come away with that question. Is that what this committee wants to stand on?
All right, that'll conclude. There may be questions, Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Any questions of the testifier? Last chance, Representative Gannon. All right. All right. Thank you for taking the time to testify. I appreciate it very much that you came down to our committee.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Isaac Creighton, followed by Julianne Donnelly-Tazul. Welcome back. You know the drill. Go ahead.
Yes. My name is Isaac Creighton. I am testifying against this bill, and I'm basically representing myself. I previously did testify on House Bill 520 prior to House Bill 668. I'm a state employee. I work for the state, and I receive state insurance as such of an employee. Right now, I have a list of stuff that's covered. HRT is covered on that, among other things. As has been raised, it's questionable if that would affect it, since it's essentially, public funds paying the employer premium sides of the insurance that I also pay into off of my paycheck on each payday I have with the state. Talking with the Office of Group Insurance, who manages the insurance for employees of the state.
Mr. Chairman, I am so sorry. We're having a hard time hearing him. Sorry.
That happens to me too. Can you get closer to the mic?
I can. With the Office of Group Insurance, they're not even sure if that would be legal per federal statutes with the Affordable Health Care Act, because they essentially said they have a list of things they have to cover to be in compliance with anti-discrimination laws, certain standards the federal government has set. If the federal government is helping fund other things of it.
We're going to have our page move that podium. That's an issue for everybody. That's what's going on. If he can. I hope that helps. Apologize for the interruption.
No, it's all good. Plenty of our state employees do, not plenty, but a good number of them do actually use their state health insurance to cover HRT and other procedures as well. And that's separate than, Medicaid and funds going towards things like we're all adults. We all work for the state and help provide for the state and the other citizens and residents of the state.
Okay. Any questions of the testifier? Thank you for taking time to testify here today. Ms. Tazul, followed by Micah McDonald.
May I hand something to the page, sir?
Say again?
May I hand something to the page?
Yes. And I'd ask the page to bring those to me first so I can take a look at those. We just don't know what she might be passing out here.
I'm really not that frightening, surely.
When you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Skog, members of the committee. I am Julianne Donnelly-Zuhl. I'm speaking on behalf of the ACLU of Idaho, and I'm here to oppose House Bill 668. I'm going to focus on two areas. First, every person, every child, and every adult has the right to explore their own life and unfold their own identity with dignity, health, and to work towards happiness. There have been statements made that gender-affirming care is exploratory or experimental, or that it doesn't necessarily consistently bring about positive results. I'm having handed to you the results of a large survey, over 90,000 individuals participating, who have participated in gender-affirming care, and I want to highlight the statistics there that show the percentage of people who found their lives to be more satisfactory after both surgical and medication gender-affirming care, and how few regretted that decision. I'll let those numbers speak for themselves. You are fully capable of absorbing them without me reiterating them. I do want to point out one other vulnerability of House Bill 668, which is a set of unintended consequences. So, in 1889-01, Section 6, it says that no gender-affirming healthcare or medical interventions, so that does include hormonal treatments, Representative Allgood, as well as surgical, that are listed out in 1506C, can be provided on state property. That sentence is passively constructed. There's no subject. There is no identified person or entity that is forbidden from making that provision. It is everyone. It is anyone. So if a person in state-owned property is administering medication to themselves, they have violated this statute. I would point out Idaho has over 8,900 students living in state-owned residences on university properties, and the expectation that this would be enforced against every one of those students is simply unrealistic and vague.
We've come to the end of the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Micah questions. Representative Ehart.
Two questions. The first one, Mr. Chairman, is not meant to be long, but you had mentioned something about children being able to affirm themselves. Do parents play a role at all in the direction of their children's lives?
Go ahead.
Chairman Skog, Representative Ehart, parents absolutely do, in conversation and with consent of their children. Children are thinking entities able to contribute what direction they want for themselves, as well as their parents providing guidance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more question. Interesting answer. The second question would be, you mentioned with this survey that these people had felt satisfied, with the surgeries that they had. How many of these people in this survey were asked this question 7 years after the surgery had been completed?
Go ahead and answer if you're able.
Chairman Skog, Representative Ehart, all of these individuals were asked at different points in their lives that didn't specify how many years later. And I think 7 is a rather random one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll expand on that at the time. It's a very specific year for a very specific reason.
Thank you, Representative. All right, no further questions. Thank you. Micah McDonald, followed by Sandra Eaton.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I just want to point out that we have just received, and for some reason my email was open, 41 pages of comments on this bill from the secretary. So I don't know if we're going to have...
yeah, let's wait until we have discussion and go into that.
I just want everybody to be aware of that in case they wanted to read them.
That would be an appropriate time to tell them when we're done with the test fires. All right, still looking for Micah McDonald. Going once, going twice. All right, Sandra Eaton.
Hello, hello. Trying to make sure.
Hold on a moment. All right, if you would, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, if you represent anyone, and tell us what you know.
All righty. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. I am Sandra Eaton. I am representing myself. I am a resident of Idaho since 2019. I am a retired accounting administrator for the state of California, the Department of Corrections. My background includes reviewing medical bills for gender transition that were in the tens of thousands. Costs continued to increase over time as well as insurance premiums. We reached the limit and went through a budget crisis when no invoices could be paid. Through a court order, we were granted the ability to pay beyond our budget for all medical costs. These costs were not reflected in our budget. We were tapping into the fund balance, the general fund, or other budgets of all other agencies. The state of California recently settled an insurance dispute and returned 80% of the premiums paid, as it was not sustainable. I do not support using taxpayer dollars for an open-ended and ever-increasing cost. I'm in favor. Thank you.
Representative Achilles.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Eaton, just, sorry, my hearing is not very good, but these costs that you were referring to, this was for the state of Idaho or the state of California?
State of California. Sorry,
Thanks,
Mr. Chairman.
And see no other questions, but Ms. Eaton, I take it that you were testifying about the extreme costs or overrides on sex change surgeries and that type of thing at the prisons?
Yes, okay. That is correct. It exceeded our budget.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Eaton, I've been told that there's a lot of follow-up care after these surgeries. Do you have any breakdown of the, like, just a general percentage, like so much was for the actual surgery and then so much was for follow-up care? Do you have any numbers with that?
Mr. Chair, Representative Scott, I don't have that kind of information with me, but I was the sole person that reviewed all of those medical bills. That was a huge team that reviewed those bills. That was the hospital bill to the medication, to on and on and on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Eaton, for being here.
Thank you.
Aaron McDermott. Is Aaron McDermott here? Followed by Celeste Terra. Okay, welcome. When you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Erin Love McDermott, and I live here in Boise. I practice family medicine as a physician assistant, and I'm here representing myself. You've heard over and over this session that all major medical organizations support gender-affirming care. Today, I'd like to discuss why that is and highlight this bill is too ambiguous to pass out of committee. Gonads, internal genitalia, and external genitalia development are all extremely complex processes that are reliant on hormonal and genetic factors. This bill seems to correctly acknowledge the non-binary nature of physical sex characteristics that can result, as noted in the exceptions on page 2. Gender identity is harder to conceptualize as we can't see the brain. To understand gender identity, we have to look at brain development. Unlike external genitalia formation, which is complete at 14 and 20 weeks for those assigned male or female at birth respectively, brain sexual differentiation follows in the very last trimester of pregnancy. This is a vast oversimplification of the multifactorial nature of gender incongruence, but is one easy to understand biological basis. Processes happening at different times can yield different results. Major medical organizations understand that science as well as the life-saving nature of these treatments. The exclusions of this bill are inconsistent at best and blatantly discriminatory at worst. Repeatedly, this bill targets gender-affirming care for, quote, for the purpose of altering the appearance of an individual. What if the purpose is to reduce suicide attempts, to ease psychosocial and emotional distress? The purpose of gender-affirming care is health, and thus an obligation of my medical oath. Help keep primary care providers in Idaho and vote no on this bill.
Thank you. That's good use of your time on the clock. I have a question. This bill is, for the most part, the way I see it, about whether taxpayers should pay for sex change procedures. Is your position taxpayers should foot the bill for that?
That's not primarily what I see this bill to mean. The fact that the language throughout this bill says surgical operation or medical intervention, to me signals that, you know, out of a lack of definition of medical intervention in this bill, we have to assume that that includes hormone therapy, medications that are used. And so that is part of the ambiguity of this bill, in my opinion, and why it can't be passed.
Thank you. All right, now Celeste Terra. Followed by Merrick Collins. When you're ready.
Okay. My name is Celeste Amatutera. I'm 18 and I'm representing myself in opposition to House Bill 668.
Where are you from?
I'm from Idaho.
What city or
What
area?
city? I was born in Caldwell.
All right. Is that where you live now? We just make a record of where you're from when you
I
testify.
live now in Boise.
All right. Go ahead.
So this bill would make it more difficult for trans people like myself to receive the treatment we require. Not only that, but it would harm trans people and especially trans youth by restricting medical availability, which harms the communities and especially those struck with poverty. For this reason, hormone replacement therapy and other medical treatments should be supported by insurance as a right, as any other citizen has the right to medical care. Saying that a trans person has to have an intersex condition in order to receive gender-affirming treatment is flawed. This disambiguation confuses what a trans person is, and whether or not we should have the care we need should not depend on this misconception. This bill is harmful because it leads people to think that the care we need to receive is risky and harmful when it is not. Medical treatment for transgender people is proven to help them. People working directly in the scientific fields that study the use of medical treatment to help transgender people have worked on careful studies and historical biographies of transgender people to prove that treatment is not only helpful, but also incredibly important for the health and livelihood of transgender individuals. Vote no on House Bill 668. Thank you.
All right. Any questions? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Celeste, thank you for testifying today. I just wanted to comment. I saw you shaking and you're nervous, and I've been there before. You did really good presenting today, so thank you.
I appreciate it.
Well, that was an easy question. All right. Merrick Collins. Merrick, welcome back. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Merrick Collins. I am a voter of District 16, and I am representing myself and the Trans Homing Project in opposition to HB 668. I am but one of many transgender Idahoans on government medical assistance that needs hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, to ensure my health and quality of life. On the outside, I can understand why many would think gender transition care is purely cosmetic and wholly unnecessary, but on behalf of the Trans Homing Project, I will use my personal experience on HRT to speak to why trans care is, in fact, healthcare. Going on HRT did so much positively for me in my life. Not only do I feel more at home in my body, what with my deeper voice and more pronounced facial hair, but I'm more physically healthy than I've ever been in my life. I'm stronger and have more endurance for exercise, which naturally encourages more growth in my physical ability. I used to have horrible asthma that would cause me great pain whenever I needed to push myself, but now it's of such little issue that I often don't even need an inhaler. Not only has my physical condition improved by leaps and bounds, but I'm more mentally in control of myself. I have a hormonal disorder, and living with turbulent brain chemistry is a fate I wouldn't wish on anyone. A regular dose of testosterone allows me to keep my mind in check and allows me to think more clearly. My hormonal disorder also caused me to have many other problems, physically and mentally, that I won't get into here, but safe to say, HRT alleviates them. I'm lucky enough that I already have all of the biological changes that I wanted from going on HRT. But for me personally, it is not just an agent of change. It's medication. Repealing Medicare and Medicaid coverage for HRT limits my access to medication that I need to function properly in society, lowering my quality of life while I live here in Idaho. Don't just listen to me. Listen to the many other trans people and professionals in trans care that have presented before me. Vote no on HB 668. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Now, the next name I'm not sure how to pronounce. David, Kociol. Followed by Sydney Fetzer.
Hello, my name is, gosh. Where'd it go? There it is. My name is David Kociol, and I'm testifying for myself, but I believe I represent, as far as I understand them, via my church and personal studies, the teachings of Christ. I am interested in this bill and oppose it primarily because I feel like there are bills that actually make sense that we could focus on drafting and passing, such as ones to address the construction of safe and dedicated bike lanes, removing the number of stroads in the city, point-to-point bus service, Sunday service for people who cannot get to church very easily without bus access, grocery credits for people living in poverty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm very glad that we could get a medical professional to give their opinion. I question their opinion because I am also familiar with years and years of research and also testimonials from survey data as recent as 2022 with over 90,000 respondents overwhelmingly defending their transition and gender affirming care as being integral to their emotional and psychological well-being. I think that there is a very strong leaning from the research and surveys justifying what these people are saying about themselves. And I think that if we as Idahoans are to care for and about and properly attend to these people who are also Idahoans, that we should consider what kind of liberty is at stake, what I believe is at stake with this kind of legislation. This is what happens when you don't rehearse.
You're doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions of the testifier? David, thank you for your testimony today. Take care.
Mm-hmm.
Sydney Fetzer. Sydney, before you start, I'm going to ask a personal question. How old are you?
I'm 19.
All right, welcome.
Go ahead. I get that all the time that I look younger.
When you're ready.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Fetzer, and I'm 19 years old. I live in Coeur d'Alene, and I'm here representing myself today. I stand in firm support of House Bill 668 and the protection of vulnerable gender-confused children. In Genesis 1:27, it says that God created male and female. As a Christian, I have moral objections to my taxpayer dollars contributing to this issue. Therefore, I do not believe that gender-affirming care should be publicly funded. I strongly urge a yes vote. Thank you so much.
Very efficient. Welcome from Coeur d'Alene.
Thank you.
Karen Hansen, followed by Marvin Alviso. Oh, this is a virtual.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Karen. I think I saw you in another committee this morning.
Not this morning, but yeah, I've been working hard this year. I am Karen Hansen from Viola, Idaho. I'm against House Bill 668. For moderate and low-income people, denying health insurance coverage for medical care is in effect denying medical care itself. The legislature is not qualified to assess what is and is not necessary treatment, nor what is and is not standard acceptable medical practice. That is for physicians, psychiatrists, patients, and insurance companies to work out. And in the case of minors, this is for parents to be included in. As most parents know, kids ask for things, whether they're good for them or not, and parents are often having to say no. So when a parent says yes, it probably means something. My main concern is families with preteen and teenage children. Interfering with parents' rights to provide the best care they can for their child using medically accepted treatments is wrong. This bill lumps all gender dysphoria treatments together and claims they are all dangerous and irreversible. This is not correct. Surgery on minors is not accepted medical practice. Many hormonal treatments are safe and reversible. This bill bans both. I am tired of seeing gender minorities being singled out due to misunderstandings and culture war dynamics. I ask the Idaho legislature to please back off. This broad, heavy-handed bill dealing with a delicate, complex subject is going to do a lot of harm. This bill is inconsistent with the parents' rights provided for in Senate Bill 1329 discussed on March 5th. The only winners here are lawyers working on the lawsuits this bill will generate. It is important to hear from medical professionals who deal directly with gender dysphoria diagnosis and treatment. Their knowledge and perspectives are valuable. Leave medical care decisions and insurance coverage decisions to the trained professionals and patients who are directly involved. It bears repeating. Denying health insurance coverage for medical care is, in effect, denying medical care itself. Vote no on House Bill 668. Thank you.
Ms. Hansen, I have a question. Did you hear our first testifier who was a doctor?
Yes, but he dealt strictly in surgery and did not deal with gender dysphoria itself. That is also deeply involves psychiatrists and endocrinologists, not surgeons.
I remember differently. Thank you. Any questions of the presenter? Seeing none. Okay, Marvin Alviso is next, followed by Tony Oxen. Welcome, Marvin.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, Representative. I am Marvin Alviso, a family physician practicing here in Boise for the past 13 years. And I'm very deeply concerned about the potential consequences of House Bill H668. As a medical professional and member of the Idaho Coalition for Safe Healthcare, I implore you to consider the ethical implications and harmful effects this bill might have on our community. H668, if passed, would represent a grave violation of medical ethics. It denies transgender individuals the right to make informed decisions about their health care, contradicting the principles of patient autonomy and informed consent. By restricting access to gender-affirming treatments, This bill undermines the dignity and well-being of not just transgender individuals, but their families and support systems. Furthermore, H668 ignores established medical consensus and best practices. Leading medical organizations recognize that the importance of gender-affirming care as an effective and evidence-based treatment for gender dysphoria. Denying transgender individuals access to these treatments not only goes against medical expertise, but also places their health at risk. And arbitrary adjustments to medical standards of care not only invite litigation, especially when one system prohibits this standard of care while another one endorses it. Moreover, it is essential to recognize that many medical procedures considered elective or non-urgent by broader public are life-saving or medically necessary, indicated on patients' needs. Procedures such as breast reduction for individuals with chronic back pain, reconstructive surgeries for burn patients, and gender-affirming surgeries for transgender individuals are all examples of interventions that may be deemed elective, but still they are medically necessary for the patient's well-being and quality of life. Discrimination against individuals based on gender identity may violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Legal challenges against this bill will likely complicate its implementation and potentially cost Idaho taxpayers valuable resources. Transgender individuals are valuable members of our society, contributing in various roles and sectors. Denying them access to essential healthcare services harms their well-being and deprives our communities of their talents and contributions. In conclusion, I urge you to reject H668 and instead focus on policies that promote access to quality health care for all Idahoans. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Doctor. We may have some questions. I see Representative Ehart would like to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doctor. Couple of questions. It's not so much meant to go against that which you said, but to better understand. First is, what sort of information do we have on those who go through this procedure and end up regretting it? Do we have, what sort of studies are really being done? What sort of follow-up care so we understand both sides, or even this procedure better?
Go ahead, Doctor.
Gotcha.
This process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative. So regret is, I mean, as far as I know, like regret is very rare, especially when a person like really gets into like the treatment in a consistent and progressive manner, so that like all of the boxes are checked. Like they have like mental health evaluation, they have like years of experience with like hormone therapy before they even do surgeries. I mean, I guess like I don't have in my experience like regrets. I have all of my, I've been treating like transgender for the past 7-8 years with 400 people that I've served. And I haven't yet to see somebody regret like even the hormonal treatment that I give them. Very rare of my patients have done surgery, and all of them has nothing to say, but like they're in deep joy and deep satisfaction that they have affirmed, that we have affirmed their gender. So in my experience, like I haven't had any. I know there are out there, but I can like look for that and submit it to you. But there will be regrets in one way or another with any type of surgery. But it's that careful relationship between the physician and the patient and even the parents to make sure that this is really the right mode for them to go through the process.
Representative Ehart, follow up.
Yes, follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doctor. Then my question to you, I think you said something about 7-8 years, 400 patients at least with no regrets. That's a pretty good record. Out of those, how many have been through the process at least 7 years?
Doctor, if you're able to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say that I would have firsthand experience that I have patients who've been on treatment for the past 7 years, and actually somebody actually moved out of state to have bottom surgery from transitioning from female to male, and it's been successful. So I can quote some of my patients that I've been treating for the past 7 years, and all I can say is that all of their lives have become better with gender transition, with puberty blockers or like oral treatments.
Representative Garner.
Chairman Skog and Doctor, did I understand you right that, I'm sorry, did I understand you right that you said that the state insurance will pay for some cosmetic surgeries already?
Go ahead, Doctor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative. I'm talking about like other elective procedures, like for people who had like for weight losses, for people who had lost great tremendous of weight. There are like some like loose skin there that are elective surgeries that can be done. And then whether if you're Medicaid or stuff like that can be paid for. And then like a burn patient, like who needs like reconstructive surgery after the burn. I'm sure that would be covered, like even if you have like your public insurance. So these are all elective, and just like the gender affirming care, I stand on that.
Doctor, this is the chairman, and I have a question. I have a state employee who's calling me all the time, every year, and wants to know why his stomach reduction surgery, because he's grossly overweight, why that won't be covered by our insurance plan. Are you saying that that is covered by Medicaid? Or do you know?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I don't know.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For a question, what's the average age that you see these hormone treatments starting in with your clinic?
So when you say hormonal treatment, I mean, it's not always like when I say somebody, I have patients as young as 12 and 13, and if they're not appropriate for hormonal treatment, we don't start it there. Because there are different forms of affirmation. There's social affirmation where we just acknowledge what the gender, what the pronoun, what the name of the patient. And unless they are really in puberty, then we don't even start talking about medications. So as young as 12, 13.
Okay, doctor, please speak through the chair when you're responding. Go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, and how does that all that work? I don't know a whole lot about this part, but how does that affect the reproductive health of the young person?
Doctor, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you. So let me cite an example. So there is a medical condition, what we call precocious puberty. So with precocious puberty, somebody who's 7 or 8 years old starts going into puberty. So what the medical system does is that it stops puberty by using puberty blocker. So that will be the same case as what we do with precocious puberty and puberty blocker patients who has gender dysphoria. And these medications, once we get to them, they have a lifespan of either 3 months, 6 months, or even a year. And then after, so for patients with precocious puberty or with early puberty, as soon as we stop this medication, then puberty ensues. I'm sorry. So with regards to like reproductive like health and this one, there was a pause, and then everything just continues once the medication wears off.
Thank you, doctor. Seeing no further questions, take care. Tony Oxen. Welcome back to committee. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. My name's Tony Oxen. I live in Nampa, and I'm a taxpayer. And I've listened to a lot of the testimony talking about this bill banning transgender surgery, and I believe clearly that this bill bans paying for it with state of Idaho tax dollars. I think there's a clear distinction that we're not trying to ban people from getting any kind of surgeries like this. If they want to have surgery like this and they have insurance that pays for it, fine. If they want to pay for it themselves, fine. I have a problem with my tax dollars paying for it. And I believe that's clearly what this H.R. 688 does on here, is it bans the state funds, state taxpayers from footing the bill for these. So I support this.
I forgot to set your timer, but you came
As I'm
way
done.
in, so. Any questions of the presenter or the testifier? Thank you, Mr. Oxen, for driving over here. Take care.
You bet.
Alexa Lynn Phil. Alexa Lynn Phil. Go ahead when you're ready.
I'm Alexa Lynn. Excuse me. I'm Alexa Lynn. I live in Nampa. When I registered to speak, they told me I was in District 10, but I think I'm District 13 at any rate. I'm a little bit ill-prepared. I came to speak with regards to the taxation issue of this and using state funds, but I can see that there's an awful lot of misinformation and misunderstanding of what transitioning requires and entails. So I would like to make my statement with regards to the taxation aspect, and then if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to offer my personal experience of transitioning over 50 years ago. So I can give you what happens after 7 years. I moved here in 2004 to work in a fine jewelry store in Meridian. From that moment, the state has become my home, and I began supporting this state. I have continually been employed and have paid income taxes for 19 years. I bought a home in Caldwell and paid property taxes since then. I vote and am actively engaged in living a full life. I contribute to the health of the business community, the cultural community, and the artistic and entertainment community in this area. My patronage and the sales tax associated contribute even more to the state coffers. I contribute to the overall health of our community by volunteering time, money, experience, and into a variety of charitable organizations. I mention these items not because you need to see the face of a real person in this community that your decisions affect every single day. We wish nothing more but to live our lives with the same freedoms, opportunities, support, and respect the rest of society enjoys. I vehemently oppose this bill and its hateful intent. This bill seeks to discriminate further against my trans...
Excuse me, using words like hateful intent impugns the motives of those who bring it. We talk about the bill, not the motives of anybody bringing a bill. Thank you.
I apologize. This bill seeks to discriminate further against my trans and non-binary siblings, compromising our health and well-being. Further vilification and marginalization of a vulnerable population is nothing more than a cruel and vicious attack. Stop the hate, do better, and serve the entire citizenry of Idaho. Thank you for your time.
Again, thank you for testimony. The warning about using words like hate towards the bill or towards your legislators here or anybody else in the room. Now, I have a question. We were going to talk about the taxes. Should a taxpayer be paying for this? I didn't hear your opinion on that, yes or no?
I'm vehemently against this bill because I feel my taxes should support all people in their medical health and emotional well-being. I do not think you should be singling out one group to not pay for necessary care, which is what this bill would seek to do.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you for driving over. Hallie Fetzer. Okay, I have to ask the same question. Are you over 18 years or older?
Yes, I'm 19 as well. We're twins.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name is Hallie Fetzer. I'm 19 years old, and I live in Coeur d'Alene. And I'm here representing myself and I believe also my fellow Christian taxpayers. I stand in support of House Bill 668. I'd like to read 1 Thessalonians 4:1-8. Finally, then, brethren, we urge and exhort in the Lord Jesus that you should abound more and more, just as you received from us how you ought to walk and to please God. For you know what commandments we gave you through the Lord Jesus. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor, not in passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. That no one should take advantage of and defraud his brother in this matter, because the Lord is the avenger of all such, as we also forewarned you and testified. For God did not call us to uncleanness, but in holiness. Therefore, he who rejects this does not reject man, but God, who has also given us his Holy Spirit. I believe that God created male and female, and I have moral objections to the government using my taxpayer dollars for this purpose. I would strongly urge a yes vote on this bill, and I pray that you will honor the Lord in your vote. Thank you.
Any questions of the testifier? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Misty Tolman.
Good afternoon, Chairman Skog, members of the committee. My name is Misty Deli Carpini Tolman, and I'm the State Director for Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates, Idaho. People of all gender identities deserve civil and human rights, including the right to high quality, affordable, and non-judgmental health care. Every single major medical association, including the American Medical Association and American Psychiatric Association, oppose coverage bans on gender affirming care. These professional and medical organizations represent millions of healthcare providers, researchers, and mental health professionals in the United States. Blanket exclusions of gender-affirming care from Medicaid limits access to necessary medical services and results in health problems and financial strain for transgender people. Let's be clear, gender-affirming care is medically necessary and life-saving care. This type of exclusion is deeply stigmatizing and creates a disparity wherein transgender individuals do not have the same rights as their cisgender counterparts. Regardless of one's stance on whether these services constitute essential medical health care, it's important to recognize the medical professionals today that attest to the fact that Medicaid does indeed sometimes cover certain elective procedures when they are medically necessary, which underscores the inherent complexities and challenges presented by this legislation. HB 668 poses significant legal and ethical concerns and undermines the rights and autonomy of trans people who paid into the Medicaid program and have the right to access the public services that this bill would prohibit as taxpayers. By prohibiting the use of public funds for gender-affirming care, it infringes upon the rights of trans people to make informed decisions about their own bodies and their own health care, free from government interference. Gender-affirming care is health care and deserves to be treated like all other health care by Medicaid. I urge you also to consider the human cost of this bill and oppose House Bill 668, ensuring that Idaho is a state that respects and protects the dignity of all of its residents, including the LGBTQ community. Please vote no.
Representative Ehart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Tolman. Believe it or not, I actually appreciate hearing from you, as we do. But you did say something that I'm not sure that I quite understand what you said, but you said that and basically trans or some of the non-binary people, I'm not sure how you'd refer to that, but that they don't have the same rights when it comes, I'm assuming when it comes to healthcare as, and I think you referred to something I disagree with, cis. Anyway, as we do, what rights when it comes to the medical healthcare do they not have that we have?
Go ahead.
Chairman Skog and Representative Ehart, I talked about this a little bit at House Bill 520 testimony, and I'm happy to talk about it again, but I'm thinking personally about the right that I had. I'm just recovering from breast cancer surgery, had a double mastectomy that was covered, and under the Cancer Care Act, I am able to also receive gender-affirming care, which means I was able to get breast reconstruction services. And I think that cisgender people today could get breast augmentation and other gender-affirming care that affirms their own gender, just because we happen to be born, you know, with the gender identity that matches our sex assigned at birth. Whereas under this bill, Medicaid recipients would not be able to receive gender-affirming care.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Tolman, if I heard you correctly, you had breast cancer and you're able to receive treatment for breast cancer. So are you stating that if somebody who identified with the other sex rather, well, I'll say trans for the sake of this argument, if someone who identified that way had breast cancer, are you saying they would not receive care?
Go ahead.
Chairman Skog and Representative Ehart, Male-bodied people do get breast cancer, and under this bill, the way it is written, they would not be able to receive gender-affirming care that affirms their identity. So
Mr.
to get
Chairman?
that breast reconstruction, how would they be able to
Okay, go ahead and finish your answer.
get that care under the language of this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I won't belabor this, but I specifically asked if, from what she said, that she had received cancer. I mean, she had cancer and received care for cancer. I wanted to know if she was insinuating that someone who had cancer that was a trans person, if she was saying they would not be able to receive then care for cancer, because that's essentially what she said. I wasn't talking about something else. So it was a very specific question about cancer.
Chairman Skog, may
If you may.
respond? I'm sorry if I misunderstood your question, Representative Ehart. Obviously, everybody would be able to receive the care for cancer or the treatment for cancer. And in addition, under the Cancer Care Act, you can get breast reconstruction surgery, which is that gender affirming care. Whereas if a male-bodied person who gets breast cancer goes in for cancer treatment, under the language of this bill, would not be able to receive that second surgery that I was able to receive.
I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman, but I think there's still a disconnect, but thank you.
All right. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
So my question, I don't understand how we're treating groups different, because we're not giving taxpayer money to, I'll just say, I don't know, non-trans people, and we're not giving it to trans people. So nobody's getting it to change their sex one way or another. So how is that picking a group and like disparaging a group?
Okay.
Chairman Skog and Representative Scott, gender affirming care, is a big umbrella. It goes beyond just surgery to change one's gender. It covers a lot of different medications. One of my examples was what I just went through, and that does create two different sets of rights for cisgender versus transgender people. I believe, I don't want to say this because I'm not 100% sure, but I hope that I can have some folks checking on this. But we were talking earlier that I believe there are other medications that are technically gender affirming that are covered under Medicaid. And I can email them to you once I get back to my seat. I'm sorry.
Okay, follow up, just quick.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Misty, so I'm just saying we're not giving the medications to this group and we're not giving them to that group. So how is that treating groups differently? Because we're just saying we're not going to use taxpayer dollars to do this. If you want to go this route, fine. If you want to go this route, fine. But we're not going to give either of the groups money to do these things.
Chairman,
if you care to answer, you can.
Sure. Chairman Skog, Representative Scott, one of the medications I'm thinking of off the top of my head is Viagra, that's covered under Medicaid and can be considered to be gender affirming and then is allowed for one group of people, whereas gender affirming medication to another group is not. I'm sorry.
Representative Allgood.
Thank you. I could have probably asked this question of a lot of the people that testified today, but you're the lucky one.
Oh boy.
So you testified that these medical procedures are medically necessary. And in my layman's mind, I picture medically necessary as an inflamed appendix that has to come out before it ruptures. That's life and death, that's medically necessary. On the other end of the scale, I would feel lots better about myself if I had long flowing hair and I wanted hair plugs. So in that scale there, I'm trying to put where gender affirming procedures would fit, because I see it more towards the hair side, in my opinion. I want some clarification there.
All right, Representative Allgood, before she answers, this is specific to surgeries and those things covered in 1506C3, if you want to look that up. Go ahead.
Chairman Skog, Representative Allgood, this is where I think it becomes dangerous to legislate medicine when we should be leaving it to the medical experts. I think a doctor can decide when something is medically necessary. And we've had a couple of medical health care experts today talk about different, we had a physician's assistant talk about different needs. We had Dr. Alviso come talk about different needs, and I think that if somebody's mental state is in a certain place, it does become medically necessary. I don't think we see people, self-harming and having suicidal ideations over your example, and yet we do over the fact of them needing this life-saving gender-affirming care. And I think that's where the difference comes for me.
One follow-up?
Quick follow-up, yes. And so I understand what you're saying, but we're kind of crossing a line where we say it is so medically necessary that the taxpayer has to pay for it. And that's the hurdle, because anybody can get these procedures. They're not restricted, except that we're asking Idaho taxpayers to pay for it. That's the hurdle that this body is dealing with.
Doesn't require an answer. Representative Roten.
Mr. Chair and Ms. Tolman, so in your situation, it seems to be that you're, at least to me, creating a little confusion in that with the breast cancer, understand mastectomy, and then you had reconstructive surgery. You say that's gender
affirming care.
Confirming. Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Thanks for jumping in there. But that essentially made you whole again, which is in many insurances, other than health insurance, when you're auto insurance, something like that, it's to make you whole. We're talking about something different here, I think. You weren't trying to change your gender, but you call it gender confirming. Some mastectomies, some have enhancements afterwards, some never replace, as I understand. Is it really the same? I mean, they were making you whole. You were not trying to, you were quite comfortable, evidently, with your gender. You weren't asking to be confirmed. So I think there's some confusion in saying that kind of procedure, and we've got a lot of people that have cancer, and now we're going to say, you want to use that here on the gender confirming, when it seems like it was just making you whole. Want to be sure we're talking about the same thing here. This wasn't an elective surgery per se. I mean, it's unfortunate that you had to do it, is what I'm saying, but I just don't see how it levels with gender conformity and your gender. I mean, maybe your identity, but you weren't trying to change something. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Chairman
That's
Skog.
the last question for this testifier. We have other people who
Representative Roten, I am sorry for bringing us down this rabbit hole. It really is clear in my mind, and so I have not tried to bring confusion to the committee. I have friends who went through breast cancer alongside me who decided to not have reconstruction surgery. I had some choose various options that definitely affirmed their identity. And so I don't see them as less whole than me because I made this decision. I don't think it's about whether or not I'm whole. I think it's about whether or not it's affirming my identity.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Nixon Matthews is virtual.
Hello.
Hello, Nixon. Welcome to committee.
Hey there.
You know the drill. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Nixon Matthews. I live in Boise, Idaho, District 16, and I am here to express my strong opposition to HB 668. So to me, this bill comes down to two words: medical necessity. And according to the Idaho Medicaid booklet, services must be available when medically necessary to meet individuals' treatment needs. Now, this bill states that gender-affirming care as it relates to trans and non-binary Idahoans is never necessary, but I want to talk about that a little bit more. So I just want you to see this folder. extensive documentation, including notarized letters from Idaho-based therapists and doctors, all affirming the necessity of my gender-affirming care. I even have notarized documents from a judge and documents from government entities accepting the statements of my therapists and my doctors. This represents the scrutiny, what we go through in order to prove our medical necessity, our gender-affirming care. Every major medical organization backs gender-affirming care. Moira, Shilagi, past president of the American Academy of Pediatrics stated, there is strong consensus among the most prominent medical organizations worldwide that evidence-based gender-affirming care for transgender children and adolescents is medically necessary and appropriate. It can even be life-saving. And there is a lot of research that consistently demonstrates that gender-affirming care significantly improves, extends, and saves lives. And if saving lives isn't considered medically necessary, what is? So the provision that gender-affirming care is never necessary is the problem. It disregards the wealth of evidence supporting the medical necessity of this care and the expertise of healthcare professionals dedicated to providing care to trans and non-binary individuals. So I ask you, please, oppose HB 668.
Thank you. Any questions of the testifier? See none. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Stephanie Fetzer, followed by Brandon Shippey. And you're ready.
Good afternoon. I won't be as well-spoken as my daughters, and I'm 53.
Bad on me.
My name is Stephanie Fetzer. I live in Coeur d'Alene, and I'm here today representing myself. I am in strong support of House Bill 668 and urge a yes vote today. I moved from California about 4 years ago, and I can attest to the ruination of a state when the public funds pot is treated as though it is bottomless. One of the things I appreciate most about Idaho is our conservative fiscal approach. My understanding of this bill is that it does not ban transgender care, but rather it prohibits the use of public funds. It seems as though some are attempting to muddy the water here today and distract from the true intent of this bill. As a Christian and an Idaho taxpayer, I am fundamentally opposed to my taxpayer dollars funding gender-affirming care. Again, I'm opposed to my taxpayer dollars funding gender transition and stand strongly in support of House Bill 668. Please vote yes today. Thank you.
Any questions? Looks like you're having a good civics lesson as a family today. All right. Brandon Shippey.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Brandon Shippey. I'm a native Idahoan. I'm from New Plymouth, and I am a disciple of the Lord Jesus Christ. I support this bill. The American Journal of Psychiatry published a paper in 2019 in a study titled Reduction in Mental Health Treatment Utilization Among Transgender Individuals After Gender-Affirming Surgeries. In this paper, they claim that there was a benefit to mental health. However, this study had many flaws, so in 2020, they issued a correction stating that it is not accurate to confidently say that gender-affirming surgeries always lead to less mental health treatment. They go on to say later on in the article, in the paper, that the conclusion that surgeries definitely result in reduced mental health treatment might be overstated. Again, that is in the American Journal of Psychiatry. So even if there was evidence that this experimental treatment was helping with mental health, taxpayers are not responsible to provide for all possible means to help someone's mental health. A 2-week vacation, for example, may help an individual's mental health. In fact, the University of Pittsburgh Mind and Body Center found that taking a vacation increases positive emotions and reduces depression. WebMD has an article titled How Travel Affects Mental Health, and they state, getting out and traveling can have many benefits for both your mental and your physical health. Exploring new places and immersing yourself in new cultures or new environments is mentally stimulating. Doing this regularly can have great effects on your mental health. So then should we propose that taxpayers pay for a 2-week vacation for everyone who has restricted access to vacations because they are not able to afford it? And my answer is no, absolutely not. It would be absurd. Therefore, I conclude that neither should we be enforcing the good taxpayers of Idaho to foot the bill for these extremely expensive surgeries that do nothing to address the mental health but only cause harm to the body. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shippey. Any questions of Mr. Shippey from New Plymouth? See none. Thank you for your time and for driving over here.
Thank you.
All right. We need to do some things, do our discussion, do our vote, or any motions, and so I'm going to have 2 more people testify. Katie Gentry, followed by Thad Butterworth. Ms. Gentry, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Thank you, members of the House Judiciary and Rules Committee. My name is Dr. Katie Gentry, and I'm an OBGYN physician and reside in District 19. I am representing the Idaho Coalition of Safe Healthcare as an Idaho physician to express my deep concerns regarding House Bill 668, which aims to restrict public funds for gender transitioning. As a medical professional committed to providing compassionate and evidence-based care, this bill will have detrimental impacts on transgender individuals, their support systems, and by default, all of our communities. House Bill 668 threatens to deny transgender individuals access to gender-affirming care, which is medically necessary and life-saving for many. Gender dysphoria is a medically recognized condition, and gender-affirming treatments, including hormonal therapy, are widely recognized by medical experts as effective interventions to alleviate distress and improve the overall well-being for transgender individuals, allowing them to lead productive lives and contribute to our society. By restricting access to these treatments, House Bill 668 disregards established medical consensus and undermines the ethical principle of providing patient-centered care. Furthermore, it is essential to recognize that transgender individuals are taxpayers and members of our community who deserve equitable access to healthcare services. Denying them access to medically necessary care based on their gender identity is discriminatory and unjust. As policymakers, I hope you all seek to be merciful and show understanding for communities of people who have not yet gotten to know. They are your constituents, as are we, the physicians who provide care for them, just like we provide care for you and all Idaho families. Moreover, House Bill 668's definition of elective procedures fails to consider the medical necessity of gender-affirming care. While some may perceive these procedures as optional, they are in fact medically indicated treatments that alleviate significant distress and improve the quality of life for transgender individuals.
Okay, I need
Just
you to
as
wrap
we,
up, if you would. Your time's expired. If you have
okay,
a final sentence, go ahead.
One more. Thank you. Just as we recognize the importance of providing medically necessary care for other conditions, we must afford the same respect and dignity to our transgender individuals seeking gender-affirming treatments.
Right.
I ask you
We have
to
a question
reject
for
this.
you. We have a question for you here. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Gentry, my question is, you use the word dysphoria. So when I looked that up, it says it's a generalized dissatisfaction with life or unease. So what I'm wondering is, when you talk about gender dysphoria, a generalized dissatisfaction to me, I just wonder, do you believe as a doctor that all parts of this pathway are necessary? And just to say, I've heard that you could have mental health or psychological appointments, you could have hormone replacement, you can actually have surgeries on your body. So I'm wondering, do you believe that as a doctor, all of these are necessary, or do you believe there's some of them should be paid for and some shouldn't. Because to me, dysphoria, generalized dissatisfaction, you would try, I just if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
If you're able, go ahead, Doctor.
Mr. Chairman and Representative, if I understand your question correctly, it's whether or not gender dysphoria, which for different individuals means different things, but is a medical diagnosis. And many individuals find that gender dysphoria could be treated with hormone therapy. Some find that it could be treated with surgery. Everyone's individual gender dysphoria is different and requires much more extensive evaluation to find out what will be right for them to not have that gender dysphoria and to be able to be a productive member of our society.
Representative Marco Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for question. So in my profession, in the past, I had create medical necessity statements for authorization of services, and you mentioned medical necessity quite a few times. So what is the criteria you're using to determine medical necessity when you're writing a diagnostic write-up for determination of services?
Go ahead.
Yes. Mr. Chairman and Representative Larson, thank you. So there is a very extensive, this is not a quick to jump on decision to have someone's gender be changed. This is something that goes through extensive processes, multiple conversations with the patient, multiple evaluations. I think you saw the folder that patient had to show all of the testimony that they had for getting the care that they needed. And so there's many different steps that are required in order to proceed with gender affirming care.
Representative Ehart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Gentry. So what, generally speaking, when patients come to you, and as you look on your career, so I'm not talking, just about the most recent, but how long do you stay with your patients from beginning and to end, and what does the end mean?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman and Representative, I am with them from the beginning of when they present to me and when they share their concerns through their time transitioning. Some individuals have already transitioned, and I will continue to take care of these men and women to the best of my abilities. There is no limit.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't mean to cut you off, Dr. Gentry. So on average, when you look at the patients you currently have, what's the average length of time that you've been engaged with them, and roughly how many patients are we talking?
Go ahead.
Representative Chairman, Representative, I recently moved to Idaho in 2020, so I've only been here and taking care of these patients for the last 3 going on 4 years. But I've had these patients during that entire time, and I plan to continue to take care of them as long as they come to see me and as long as I am here in Idaho.
Representative Allgood.
Yes, Doctor. Could you just briefly describe how the insurance companies treat this kind of treatment and how your office is covered for this type of treatment?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Representative, I have a story of one of my patients who, I had 2 patients. One of them was requesting a hysterectomy because she no longer needed her uterus for childbearing and elected to have the uterus removed. She had state medical funding for her insurance. I had another patient who elected to have her uterus removed because they did not feel that it was a part of them, that they saw themselves more as a transgender individual, and the uterus was causing them this gender dysphoria. They also were under state insurance. The first patient got covered for their hysterectomy. Their second patient did not.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Doctor. You're on the hot spot. We have one more question here from Representative Scott.
Happy to answer it.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Gentry, it's good to have a doctor that's been involved in this. And so you mentioned that people choose surgery or hormones, and I was looking into this dysphoria, and until recently there used to be psychological help because this was actually considered a mental disorder. So do you, in your treatment for gender dysphoria, do you have any psychological help, or is it just the surgeries and the hormones?
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman and Representative, in my clinic, I do not have the psychological help, the psychiatrists, the counselors, but I make sure that my patients all have that because many of these patients have these other needs beyond hormone replacement and surgical interventions for their gender dysphoria. It is a team and a team approach to lead to the best health care for these patients.
Quick follow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Dr. Gentry. Is that covered under insurance, the psychological help?
Go ahead.
Or, yeah.
Mr. Chairman and Representative, some insurances do cover that psychological help. I am not sure 100% on that answer at this time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Doctor, for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you.
There's been a request for a comfort break from a committee member, but we're going to finish up at the last testifier, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. Thad Butterworth. When you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony this afternoon. My name is Thad Butterworth. I reside in Meridian, Idaho, and in this case, I am representing myself. I am deeply concerned for the transgender community over the current regimen of treatments. They've been shown to have very negative long-term health care effects. Some of those effects include reduced bone density, seizures, cognitive effects, and this is according to the American College of Pediatrics. In addition, studies from both Birmingham University as well as Johns Hopkins show that suicidal ideation is 20 times more likely in those who have received gender-affirming care, and that they are more likely to act on those ideations. For these reasons, I believe we should be focusing our state resources on finding more effective and compassionate treatments for those suffering from gender dysphoria. I urge you to vote yes on House Bill 668. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. All right. With that, we're going to take a recess for 10 minutes. We're called back into order. Representative Young, if you'd like to conclude, and there will be some time for questions. When we're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee. I'd like to point out just a few things.
Could you, Mike?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee. I'm Representative Julianne Young. I represent District 30. Just for the record, I'd like to point out a few things about House Bill 668. First of all, this bill is about the allocation of public funds and what things we will and will not choose to fund using those taxpayer dollars. It is not about what individuals or doctors or insurance companies may choose to do within their own domain. We routinely make decisions about the use of taxpayer dollars in this building. And I would point out that in the arena of healthcare, there are routine decisions to provide different types of procedures to people based on a diagnosis. We heard testimony from one doctor, for example, that in one instance there was permission given to receive a particular procedure. That same procedure was not offered to another person. However, we don't consider that discriminatory. We simply recognize that there is a burden on those providing the services to make determinations about what is and is not medically necessary. We've included the language specific to these procedures because we do believe that at best these procedures are controversial. You heard testimony from Dr. Teague at the beginning indicating his frustration with the lack of adherence to evidence-based practice in some of these areas. In addition to this, committee, I would also point out that if our category is defined by the treatment that we seek, we would find ourselves in a cycle where we would never be able to deny to spend money on any treatment, or for that matter, anything else that we get asked to pay for in this building. At some point in time, we need to make decisions about what is and is not a good use of taxpayer funds. I would also remind the committee that individuals who seek these treatments remain dependent in many instances for the balance of their lives on hormone treatments and things to help them sustain their basic well-being, because otherwise healthy tissues and organs have been removed with lasting consequences. It's very difficult to calculate what this cost looks like long-term. And we also know that many European nations and other places who are further ahead on this issue than we are, including places like the state of California, are seeing things that ought to be concerning to us. And in some instances, those nations and political entities are backing away from some of these policies. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I urge your support for House Bill 668, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions of the presenter? Representative Dixon, 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Young. So I just have a couple phrasing questions, I guess. On page 1, on lines 35 to 38, it mentions that it's I guess defining the surgical operations or medical interventions, but it says for the treatment of any infection, injury, and it names a few things. Some of those would be emergencies. So I'm just wondering how that coincides with EMTALA, because hospitals are required to treat emergencies. So would they have to determine whether or not the person had come in because of an injury based on a gender surgery, or how would that work?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Dixon, I would point you to the top of this section where you see that this is the definition of exempted surgical operations or medical interventions. And so House Bill 668 prohibits the use of taxpayer funds for many of these procedures that we have talked about. However, these are things which are exempted from the prohibition, which means they would be able to be paid for with taxpayer funds.
Follow-up?
Sort of a follow-up. Thank you. I just misread that. So then my other question, I'm wondering, and I apologize, I was in a meeting at the beginning of our committee hearing, so you may have answered this previously, but when we're talking about no taxpayer dollars, are we talking about just Medicaid, or are we talking about like the state health care plan, so all state employees? I don't know if that was touched on before, but.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Dixon, we did touch on that at the beginning, but I'm happy to answer it again. This is regarding taxpayer dollars. There are other decisions that are still in play that need to be made by entities outside this room. And so there is some uncertainty as to how this will play out exactly in regard to state benefits. But what we say in House Bill 668 is taxpayer dollars will not be used for this purpose.
Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Young. It's always nice to ask you questions. But what I think a very legitimate big concern here is that this goes into effect on July 1st, 2024, and we don't know, as I'm understanding it, we don't know about whether this is going to affect insurance coverage, how that's not just for the 60,000 state insureds, but like at the universities and at other other facilities that receive state funds. And it seems like that should be in the bill as to what the intent is there, rather than leaving everybody in limbo and not knowing what's going to happen on July 1st.
Was there a question in there, Representative Gannon?
Is there a way that we can amend this bill to deal with that issue?
Representative.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon, this bill doesn't specifically address insurance benefits, and I would point out that we are in the middle of a transition between our insurance providers, which will take place on July 1st, and so there may be other things that will change. That's just part of what happens when you change insurance providers, and so there are things that will yet remain to be determined, but that is not the topic of this bill.
Representative Scott.
I'm going to make a motion to send House Bill 668 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you. Representative Keelys.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a substitute motion to send House Bill 668 to general orders, and I'd like to do that for a couple of reasons, if I may explain.
Certainly.
First of all, I understand the intent of the sponsors and the gentleman on the second floor. There are a number of issues, however, there are a number of issues and unintended consequences with 668. I will say I think this is the first time I've heard in this body that we're looking to lessons from California and Europe in terms of setting policy here, but I'll just sort of set that observation aside. As we heard from Doctors McDermott, Gentry, and Alviso, the medical research is not as clear, I believe, as Dr. Teague suggests. This is complex. I think importantly, though, from a bill construction standpoint, the language is inconsistent between this first section, specifically 1A and 1C. Right? In 1C, we defer to good faith medical decisions for a disorder, but in A, we are determining what is and what is not a medical disorder. So it's the legislature making these decisions, not medical professionals. And so, I think we've lost that element of good faith when we're looking at paragraph 1A. And do we or do we not recognize a dysphoria, right? So if that is a medical term, suddenly we don't recognize it in one section, but we do sort of look towards the good faith of doctors in the other section. Another issue is, and I've said this from the beginning, this undermines the rights of taxpayers who are exercising their fundamental constitutional rights to happily live as transgender Idahoans. They have contributed into all of these public services prohibited in this bill, right? In Section 2, it's public funds. Section 4, it's Medicaid. Section 5, it's whether the doctors who might treat them are employed by counties.
Representative Achilles, we're in the question phase. Are you into argument now?
Well, no, I've put forward a substitute motion, Mr. Chairman.
So you're speaking to the motion.
And I'm speaking to the motion.
Are there any other questions of the presenter, committee? All right, Representative Young, you may take your seat as we're going to proceed to vote on these, it looks like. I apologize for interrupting for that clarification. Go ahead, Representative Achilles.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. So again, on page 2, in all of these things that are public elements that trans taxpayers have paid into are prohibited from being used to deliver service to trans Idahoans. And I think that is that's just a gigantic inconsistency here between what people have contributed and what their rights, their fundamental rights to get the services out of the system. And I think if we can extend this scenario, or we can extend this issue to scenario here. So think about an adult college student. They're 21 years old. They're living in the dorms. That's a state facility, right? And if we're referring to 181506C, and we go down here to the subsection 3C Roman numeral I, by the plain language, we're going to kick trans students out of the dorms if they're taking hormone supplements in the dorm. If they wake up in the morning and they take first thing they do is take their hormone supplements, this bill would kick them out of the dorm because that's a state facility. I also just want to remind everybody that Medicaid is not a lifetime care plan. It's a temporary program to help people get healthy again so they can get back to work. So a lot of this conversation that, we're putting people on the path of lifetime care, we're not. They may be going on the path of lifetime care, but it's only in perhaps a short window when they're on Medicaid. The rest of the time, they're taking care of it. And finally, I think a really big one here is we haven't solved for the ambiguity around state employees, right? They're paid by the taxpayers. They have every right to live as transgender Idahoans who work for the state. And honestly, we need to answer that question in this bill before we put this thing forward, or we risk inserting just this huge unknown into how we treat state employees under the conditions of this bill. And finally, I said this before when we first talked about the bill, and I just want to make this point again. We need to be clear about this community. This trans survey that was sent around is the largest that was ever conducted. 94% of people who conducted this survey said they were more satisfied in their lives after transitioning. There is no 7-year regret here. There are thousands of Idahoans, many are my constituents, many are my friends, who are happily living as trans men and women. And I encourage you all to spend time with the trans community to understand what it's like to live as a trans individual in the state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude my comments on the substitute motion.
Representative Young, did you have something you wanted to say?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to share some information with the committee, but I would like to give others a chance to speak first.
I didn't see another light. Representative Roden.
Mr. Chair, just discussion, and I hear the taxpayer, and that's what we're talking about here, the taxpayer funds. And I pay taxes, and I don't have just an unlimited ask. I pay taxes. I'm from Nampa. They don't let me drive the police car because I pay taxes. It doesn't cover everything. It's not carte blanche. You don't. And that's what we're talking about here is Idaho taxpayer dollars being applied to this specific situation. Just because you're a taxpayer, we're all taxpayers. I don't, I think I would, just for you, I think I would probably feel better if I was able to get rid of some of this inner tube that I carry around as I've gotten older. But that would be, my decision, and I wouldn't expect taxpayers to pay that. Now, that may not be on equal footing, but we've also heard, reconstruction, as the good lady spoke about, as being gender affirming, which confused me because, that was making her whole. So you're not always talking apples and oranges here. This bill is with regard to spending taxpayer dollars on this. And so I don't think we're getting to, asking, do you think if it's right or if it's wrong as far as the procedures and why they're doing it, but the taxpayer. So again, I just want to go back to, they don't let me drive the police car. I don't get to ask for just I can't expect everything to be given to me and covered because I'm a taxpayer, and I want to protect our taxpayer dollars the best I can.
Representative Ehart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, I will not support the Second Amendment. I will be supporting the first. And I think there's a couple things. It's probably not a secret where I'm standing. And I think some of my questions maybe help to lead one to understand that, but I couldn't get answers to my questions. First, I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that by excluding taxpayer funds that somehow we are being discriminatory. In essence, if you want to use that word, we discriminate on everything we do in our life, because another synonym for discriminatory would be making decisions, making judgment calls, whatever may be along those lines, which is what our role here as members of the legislative body, what we've been called to do. We exclude many things. We must treat the taxpayer dollars with a sacred discretion and to be used, I think, very, very carefully. Now, to say that adequate research has been done in this area really is false. This is still, when you think in historical terms, this idea of someone being able to change their gender, and I say gender because it's impossible to change your sex, not that I believe you can change your gender, but in terms of history, it's just simply inadequate. That this is a new idea that's been placed on us, and then some people have jumped on board that of course we can just do this, but we're finding out the longer we go that there are a heck of a lot of harms that are coming from those who've gone through this process. Some have already been pointed out, but particularly the sterilization of those individuals where this has happened. Problems, especially the younger they are, finding out that their bones become brittle, particularly in females, and their life expectancy has been greatly diminished. And depending on the age and where, there are just so many harms to individuals through this that for us as the state to say we're going to use state taxpayer funds to aid in this, I think is completely wrong. We've also had examples through the years. Time frame actually does matter. And because we haven't been through this very long, even other nations are realizing that this isn't working and that there are problems. And they're a little bit ahead of us in starting to stop some of this. But the time frame actually does matter. 7 years is starting to be the time frame where you will see a major amount of regret. And that's why when we are talking about the survey, and as I asked others, what the time frame is, because we're going to find that that's going to be more and more important to understanding what people are actually going through. Now, that's not to say that some can't not go through this and be fine. We absolutely recognize that that too can happen. But I was a little distraught to hear the testimony of Dr. Marvin Alviso. I might say that incorrectly, but to hear his testimony that he had over 400 patients. And I asked how many had experienced regret, and he said not one. Something's wrong there. Either we're not asking the right questions or we're not actually helping our patients, if not one. Statistically, I think that is almost impossible. And so I would just ask us that moving forward that we continue to, it's our job as a legislative body to make very careful decisions with the taxpayer funds. And though this particular discussion has crossed both places, it needed to because of that with which we're dealing. And I would ask us to do a red light to the Second Amendment, and I will be supporting the First Amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Motion. I said amendment. Motion. Yeah. It's been a long day.
Thank you, Representative Ehart. It sounded like you were voting against the Second Amendment there for a minute. Somebody's going to clip that in the campaigns coming up. All right. No further red lights. There is a motion probably before the committee, a substitute motion to send House Bill 668 to general orders. All those in favor of sending to general orders indicate by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman, can we do this as a voice vote, please?
What's that?
Voice vote, please.
That's what we're doing.
I'm sorry.
I understand. You want a roll call vote. Okay. We're going to roll call
I
vote.
did have one thing to say, Mr.
All right,
Chairman.
we're going to do reverse order since my name is on the bill. Roll call vote. Substitute motion to send to general orders.
Mr. Chairman, we have some lights.
Yeah, we turn your lights
To
on.
turn on.
vote.
I'm so sorry.
On to vote.
Mr. Chairman, might I petition your decision, even if you vote last, might I ask that we start at the top of the ledger with those of us with the most experience and work our way down?
Oh, let's just do reverse order. That's too confusing for me.
It's discriminatory.
You can start at W. It's fine with me.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
Yeah.
Representative Gannon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to bring up one issue, and that is that I haven't read any of the, other than just kind of see that there's 41 pages of comments that we got. And we are getting these comments to the whole committee. We got it at 1:55. And so the comments that are going to the, and I think this happened in State Affairs too, where we got them during the hearing. And I think we've got to get those comments, substantial time before the hearing so that we can see, so that we can
Let's
digest.
talk about that after committee.
Okay, I'm just thinking it makes it is, I don't know, it's kind of hard to, you're kind of voting without.
Let's
having
talk about it after
considered.
committee. Representative Gannon, we're going to go to vote now. Go ahead. Tessie Nancy.
Representative Achilles.
Aye.
Representative Church.
Aye.
Representative Gannon.
Yes.
Representative Roten.
No.
Representative Sauter.
No.
Representative Lambert.
No.
Representative Handy.
No.
Representative Garner.
No.
Representative Gallagher.
No.
Representative Dixon, 24.
No.
Representative Allgood.
No.
Representative Alfieri.
No.
Representative Erickson.
No.
Representative Cannon.
No.
Representative Young.
No.
Representative Ehart.
No.
Representative Scott.
No.
Representative Skog.
No. We now have a motion properly before the committee, House Bill 6.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes.
Just so that I have the opportunity to clear a couple of things up, may I speak to this initial motion?
I apologize. I'm wanting to get us to the floor, so yes, please, you have
Okay.
clarifications.
Thank you. Just so that we get out in front of the narrative, and there are a couple of things that were said that I think are highly inaccurate. So when we look at subsection 6 in the legislation, it was stated that if somebody's staying in a dorm, now they can't take their medication or whatever it is that they're doing. This language is clearly referring to somebody who's reserving or using the facility as a whole for the purpose of giving the treatments. It's not dictating the behavior of someone who may be renting or staying in the facility. And so I just wanted to get out ahead of that so that that doesn't turn into a narrative. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if we're going to
Representative
allow,
Achilles.
I'll just be quick, but the reference is all of 1506.3. And one of the subsets under that section is hormone therapy. So I'm sorry, Representative, but I disagree with your reading on this.
Now, let's vote. No red lights, I'm not looking at it unless you're voting. So there's to send 668 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Would you like to be recorded as voting no? Look at me so I know. All right, the minority party members would like to be recorded as voting no. Please do so. The motion carries. It shall be done. And I